It was one of those nights when the sky looked like an endless sheet of dark velvet, pierced only by the faint glow of a crescent moon. The wind howled through the empty streets, rattling windows and chasing stray leaves across the hospital parking lot. But amidst the cold and gloom, a tiny figure sat unmoved, as if waiting for something or someone. Nurses and doctors hurried past, their breath fogging up in the frosty air, but the small brown puppy remained a fixture at the hospital's entrance. Some people glanced his way, but most ignored him, too busy or too troubled to pay attention. He was just a stray to them, a sad little creature left to fend for himself. But tonight, something would change. Dr. Samuel Reed, known for his sharp intellect and colder heart, was wrapping up his shift in the ER when he first noticed the puppy. The doctor paused, narrowing his eyes. He had passed by this door countless times, but how had he missed this dog before? There was something odd about how the puppy sat, his eyes fixed on the automatic doors, as though he expected them to open. For someone he loved, curiosity gnawed at Samuel. He approached slowly, crouching down to the dog's level. "Hey, buddy, what are you doing out here in this cold?" he murmured, almost to himself. The puppy's ears twitched, but he didn't move, his eyes never leaving the hospital doors. Samuel looked around, half expecting someone to appear and claim the dog, but the lot was empty. The next evening, after another long shift filled with emergencies and noise, Samuel stepped out into the night and found the puppy still there. Same spot, same unwavering gaze. A light snow had begun to fall, collecting on the puppy's back, but still, he waited. Samuel couldn't shake the thought of the puppy as he drove home that night. There was a story here, he was sure of it. But what? Days turned into weeks. Samuel, who had never owned a pet and never thought much about animals, found himself stopping by the entrance to check on the puppy before heading home. He brought scraps of food from the hospital cafeteria, which the puppy ate hesitantly but never left his post. The mystery deepened when Samuel asked around. Nurses said they'd seen the puppy for almost a month. Some believed he had been abandoned. Others thought he was waiting for an owner who had gone inside and never returned. But no one knew for sure. Driven by a mix of compassion and curiosity, Samuel decided to dig deeper. Late one night, after his shift, he walked back into the hospital and started asking questions. Had anyone been admitted around the time the puppy first appeared? Any patients who never made it out? The receptionist, an older woman named Martha, leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "Funny you ask. There was a car crash about a month ago. A young woman, she was brought in, but she didn't make it. Poor thing, and you know, she had a dog with her. At least that's what the paramedics said, but no dog was ever brought in." Samuel's heart tightened. Could this be her dog, waiting faithfully for an owner who would never return? He decided to check the hospital records, and with Martha's help, traced the woman's identity. Emily Carson. She had no family in town. Only one emergency contact, a brother who lived out of state. The next day, as Samuel sat near the puppy, gently stroking his fur for the first time, he whispered, "Were you waiting for Emily? Is that why you're here?" The dog whimpered softly, as if in response. Determined to help, Samuel reached out to Emily's brother, Mark. When Mark arrived a week later, his eyes filled with tears at the sight of the dog. "That's Max," he choked out. "Emily's dog. They were inseparable. I can't believe he's been waiting here all this time." But just when Samuel thought the story had reached its heart-wrenching conclusion, Mark shared something that added a twist Samuel hadn't expected. "You know, Emily always said if anything ever happened to her, Max would protect her until the end. But there's something else. Emily was a nurse here years ago. She loved this hospital. She even met someone here she cared about deeply. A doctor, I think, but they lost touch. She used to say this place felt like home. Maybe that's why Max came back. Maybe he thinks she's still here." Samuel felt a jolt in his chest. A nurse? A doctor she loved? Who was this mystery man? And why did that detail feel so close to home? The days that followed were filled with new questions. As Samuel spent more time with Max, trying to help him adjust, he also began asking old staff members about Emily. Slowly, A story unfolded of a love that never had a chance to blossom. Emily had been close to a young doctor, someone she had wanted to confess her feelings to. But before she could, she had been offered a job in another city and left, only to return years later for a visit. The visit that would end in tragedy. One night, as Samuel sat by Max, stroking his soft fur, a memory surfaced, one he had buried deep. A kind nurse who used to leave notes for him in the staff lounge, always signed with a simple E. A gentle smile, a warm laugh. Emily. The realization hit him like a wave. "I knew her," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "Max, I knew Emily." Max looked up at him as if understanding, and for the first time, nuzzled into Samuel's side. From that night on, Samuel and Max became inseparable. The doctor who had never wanted a pet now couldn't imagine life without the loyal dog by his side. And as he walked Max past the hospital every evening, he felt a quiet peace, knowing that Emily's spirit lived on in the little creature who had waited so long. But as winter melted into spring, and the flowers began to bloom around the hospital grounds, a new mystery began to stir. Unmarked letters arriving for Samuel, signed only with an E, containing words that only Emily could have known. Then, one evening, as Samuel and Max sat under the old oak tree near the hospital garden, a figure approached from the shadows, a woman with soft eyes and a gentle smile, holding an old photograph, one of Emily and Max together. "Dr. Reed?" she asked softly. "I think we need to talk about Emily and about you." Samuel's breath caught in his throat. Who was she? And what did she know? Max stood up, wagging his tail as if recognizing the woman. And so, what had begun as a tale of loyalty, loss, and newfound friendship was now a story still unfolding, layered with secrets, love, and the unshakable bond between a woman, her dog, and a man she had never forgotten. Samuel's heart pounded as he looked at the woman standing before him. Her face held a calm kindness, but her eyes shimmered with untold emotions. Max stood by Samuel's side, tail gently wagging as if recognizing an old friend. "I'm Lily," she introduced herself softly, holding out the photograph. "Emily's closest friend. We were like sisters." Samuel took the photograph with trembling hands. It was a beautiful shot. Emily smiling brightly, Max leaning against her, eyes gleaming with joy. Memories surged through Samuel's mind, fleeting moments with Emily in the hospital corridors, quiet smiles exchanged over patient files, and a sense of something more that never had a chance to bloom. "I never knew she had a friend like you," Samuel murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "She spoke of you often, Dr. Reed," Lily said gently. "You were important to her." The revelation struck Samuel deeply. He had always been so absorbed in work, so cautious about opening his heart, and now it seemed Emily had been waiting for a sign from him too, a sign that never came. "I've been receiving letters," Samuel confessed, watching Lily's expression carefully. "Letters signed E, things only Emily could have known." Lily's eyes widened slightly. "Letters? But Emily, she's gone." "I know," Samuel whispered, "but someone is sending them. Someone who knows everything." Lily looked away for a moment, lost in thought. "Emily kept a journal. She wrote letters she never sent. Letters to people she loved, to you. Maybe someone found them." Samuel's mind raced. "Do you know where her things are? Her journal?" "She had a small apartment," Lily replied. "I can take you there." The next day, Samuel and Lily, accompanied by Max, arrived at Emily's apartment. It was a modest, cozy space filled with plants and photographs. Everything was exactly as she had left it. Lily led Samuel to a drawer in Emily's desk. Inside were stacks of papers, neatly bound journals, and envelopes addressed but never mailed. Samuel's hands trembled as he picked up a letter with his name on it. "Dear Samuel, I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to give this to you, but I need to say it somewhere, even if only on paper. I've loved you from the moment we first laughed over spilled coffee in the break room. You've always been so strong, so kind, but I've seen the sadness in your eyes. If only you would let someone in, Maybe you wouldn't have to carry the weight alone. Samuel's vision blurred with tears. The words echoed in his heart, cutting deeper than any wound he had ever known. More letters followed, some happy, some sad, but all filled with a love Emily had never been able to share aloud. And then he found one that froze him in place. If anything happens to me, please take care of Max. He's not just a dog, he's a part of me. He'll need someone who understands. And Samuel, if you're reading this, I hope you know now how much you've always meant to me. Samuel clutched the letter to his chest. The truth was now undeniable. Emily had loved him deeply, and Max had known. That's why the dog waited. He was holding on for her, and maybe for Samuel too. But the mystery of the letters remained. Who had been sending them? As they sifted through Emily's things, a knock sounded at the door. A young man stood there holding a small box. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said nervously. "I was Emily's neighbor. She asked me before she passed to deliver this to the man who came for Max." Samuel took the box with trembling hands. Inside was a locket with Emily's photo, a collar tag for Max, and one final letter. "Samuel, if you're reading this, it means Max found you. I knew he would. I never had the courage to tell you how I felt. But if there's still time, maybe you and Max can heal together. You always seemed so lonely. Maybe Max will give you the love I never could. Please don't shut yourself away anymore. Life is short. Love while you can. With all my heart, Emily." Tears streamed down Samuel's face. Max leaned in, nuzzling him gently as if to say, "It's okay, I'm here." From that day forward, Samuel was never alone. Max was his constant companion, walking beside him through grief, healing, and newfound hope. And every evening, they would sit under the oak tree near the hospital, watching the sunset, the place where Emily had left her mark on both their lives. But the story was not over. As the days grew warmer, Samuel began to find more letters, tucked into unexpected places, his locker at work, inside books he borrowed from the library. Someone was still watching over him and Max, making sure Emily's final wish was fulfilled. Who it was, Samuel still didn't know. And then one day, another twist. A letter that read, "I knew you'd take care of Max. But there are things about Emily you don't know yet. Meet me where it all began, under the oak tree. E." As Samuel read the letter, Max barked softly, as if encouraging him. The next chapter was waiting to be written. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky with hues of amber and rose. As Samuel made his way to the old oak tree, Max walked loyally by his side, tail swaying gently, as though sensing something important was about to happen. Samuel clutched the mysterious letter in his pocket, heart pounding. The words, "Meet me where it all began." Under the oak tree, Anna repeated in his mind. Who was this person? How did they know so much? As he reached the tree, Samuel scanned the area. No one was there, at least not yet. He sat on the bench beneath the spreading branches, Max curling at his feet, eyes alert. Minutes passed. Then footsteps echoed behind him. Turning, Samuel saw a woman in her late 30s, carrying an envelope and a small box. Her eyes glistened as they met his. "Dr. Reed?" she asked gently. "Yes," Samuel replied, standing slowly. "Are you the one who's been leaving the letters?" She nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm Emma, Emily's sister." Samuel's breath caught. Her sister? But Lily never mentioned. Emma smiled sadly. "We were estranged, a family rift. I wasn't there when she needed me most. But I came back too late. I've been watching over Max ever since I found out. And when I saw you taking care of him, I knew Emily would have wanted it." She handed him the box. "Emily left this with me, meant for you if you ever found Max. I never had the courage to give it to you until now." Samuel opened the box carefully. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet inscribed with Emily's handwriting. "To Samuel, for the day you find your heart." Tears welled up in his eyes. She knew. Emma nodded, eyes filled with her own grief. "She always loved you. She never stopped. They sat together under the tree, and Emma began to share stories Samuel had never heard about Emily's dreams, her struggles, and her unspoken love for him. As dusk settled around them, Samuel felt a weight lifting from his heart, replaced by a sense of closeness to Emily that he had never known when she was alive. As weeks passed, Emma and Samuel became close friends, bound by their shared love for Emily. Max, too, seemed happier, no longer waiting outside the hospital, but walking proudly beside Samuel on his daily rounds. The dog who had once waited in the cold now had a home and a family. Yet the letters didn't stop. One evening, as Samuel returned from a long shift, he found a letter slipped under his door. The handwriting was unmistakable, Emily's, but this time it contained something new. Dear Samuel, if you are reading this, you found Max and perhaps even found some healing. But there's one last thing I need you to know, something I never had the courage to say in life. Come to room 308. There you'll find the truth I never could speak. Room 308. Samuel's mind raced. That room had been closed for months, after renovations. What could possibly be there? With Max at his side, Samuel rushed back to the hospital. The corridors were quiet, night shift barely beginning. As he reached room 308, he hesitated, heart pounding. Slowly, he pushed the door open. Inside was a small table with a journal resting on it. Samuel picked it up with trembling hands. It was Emily's. As he flipped through the pages, he read her innermost thoughts, fears, hopes, her love for him, and something else. Plans. To leave the city not because she wanted to, but because she had been diagnosed with a rare condition she didn't want anyone to know about. She had been trying to spare Samuel the pain of watching her fade away. Tears streamed down his face as he read her final entry. If Samuel ever reads this, please know, I never wanted to leave. But if there's one thing I hope, it's that you will live fully, love deeply, and never let fear keep you from happiness. And please love Max for both of us. Samuel sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Max pressed against him, licking his hand gently, as if comforting him. In that moment, Samuel knew what he had to do. He would honor Emily's memory, not by dwelling on the past, but by living the life she had wished for him. And Max, the little dog who had waited so faithfully, would be his guide through that journey. As he left room 308, dawn was breaking over the town, and for the first time in a long while, Samuel felt a sense of peace. But as they walked out of the hospital, Samuel noticed something strange, a figure watching them from across the street. When he turned to, look properly, the figure was gone, leaving behind only a white envelope on the bench where they had stood. Samuel picked it up and read, "The truth is deeper still, Samuel. If you wish to know everything, meet me where Emily and you first met. There are things you don't yet understand. E." With renewed determination, Samuel looked at Max, who wagged his tail as if ready for the next adventure. The mystery was far from over. Samuel stood frozen on the hospital steps, Max pressing against his leg, sensing the tension in his companion. The letter in his hand shook slightly as the morning breeze picked up, rustling the trees lining the hospital grounds. Meet me where Emily and you first met. There are things you don't yet understand. E. Samuel knew exactly where that was. The old coffee shop just around the corner, where, in a moment of clumsiness, they had both reached for the same coffee cup, laughing awkwardly as their hands touched. The beginning of everything. With determination, Samuel walked towards the coffee shop, Max trotting quietly beside him, his tail swaying, ears perked up. Memories swirled in Samuel's mind. Emily's laughter, her warm smile, the way she would glance at him when she thought he wasn't looking. The shop was mostly empty when Samuel entered, the morning rush yet to begin. He chose a corner table, the one they had always sat at, and waited, heart pounding. Minutes turned into an hour, and just when Samuel began to wonder if it had been a cruel joke, a man entered the shop. He was tall, wearing a dark coat, and his sharp gaze immediately found Samuel. Without a word, The man approached and slid into the seat across from him. "I've been waiting for this moment," the man said quietly, placing a small leather-bound journal on the table. His voice was calm, but something about his presence was unsettling. "Who are you?" Samuel asked, eyes narrowing. The man offered a faint smile. "My name is Ethan. I was Emily's confidant. You could say I knew parts of her life that even her family didn't." Samuel's stomach churned. Why all the mystery? Why the letters? Why not come forward sooner? Ethan looked down at the journal. "Because I made her a promise, to protect her secrets. But now, seeing you and Max together, I realize it's time you knew everything." He slid the journal toward Samuel. "This contains everything Emily never told you. The truth about her illness, her fears, and something else, something dangerous." Samuel's brow furrowed. "Dangerous? What do you mean?" Ethan leaned closer. "Emily didn't just die from illness. She was being followed, harassed. She never told you because she didn't want to pull you into it. But she suspected someone was after her. And I think Max knows more than we realize." Samuel felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Who? Why?" Emily had uncovered something in the hospital, records she wasn't supposed to see. She never got the chance to tell anyone. "Except for me, in bits and pieces," Ethan said, glancing around as if afraid of being overheard. "And she left Max with you because she knew if anything happened, you'd protect him." Max let out a soft growl, almost as if agreeing. Samuel placed a hand on his head, feeling the dog's tension. Opening the journal, Samuel flipped through pages filled with Emily's careful handwriting. As he read, a story unfolded, one he hadn't expected. Emily had discovered discrepancies in hospital patient records, people listed as discharged, who had never left, patients who had mysteriously died under vague circumstances. Emily had believed someone inside the hospital was covering something up. Tears welled up in Samuel's eyes as he read her words. "If anything happens to me, if these people find out what I know, I need someone to protect Max. He's seen things. And if Samuel ever finds this, please know, he's the only one I trust." Samuel looked up at Ethan. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Ethan shook his head. "Emily was scared. She said she didn't know who to trust. And now, after she's gone, I think whoever was watching her might be watching you." A cold weight settled on Samuel's chest. "What do I do?" Ethan stood, his expression serious. "We work together. We figure out what she found, protect Max, and find out who's behind this before it's too late." As Ethan left the cafe, Samuel sat for a long moment, Max leaning against him. He knew this was just the beginning of a deeper, darker mystery, one that now put them both in danger. That night, Samuel returned home, locking the door carefully. Max stayed close, following him from room to room. As Samuel sat with Emily's journal, flipping through more entries, he found another letter, one addressed to Ethan, never sent. "Ethan, if anything happens to me, please protect Max and Samuel. I've left clues in the places we used to go. Please help him find them. Don't let my death be for nothing." Samuel's mind raced. Clues? In places they used to go? He thought of the oak tree, the hospital garden, the library, places where they had shared moments of quiet together. Determined, Samuel knew what he had to do. With Max at his side, he would follow the trail Emily had left, uncover the truth, and protect the little dog who had never stopped waiting. But as Samuel turned off the light, ready to start the search the next day, Max sat at the window staring out into the night. His ears twitched at every sound, and his eyes never left the shadows beyond the streetlights, as if he knew someone was watching. The story was far from over. The morning sun poured through Samuel's window as he stared out, mind racing with thoughts of Emily's journal, Ethan's warning, and the unknown danger looming around them. Max sat quietly beside him, eyes always alert, as if he too was aware of the invisible threat. Samuel took a deep breath. Today he would begin the search for the clues Emily had mentioned in her letter to Ethan, clues that could explain everything. His first stop would be the old oak tree in the hospital garden, where he and Emily had spent many peaceful moments. With Max walking loyally by his side, Samuel arrived at the hospital, keeping his head low as if to avoid attention. The staff greeted him as usual, unaware of the storm brewing within him. Max, now allowed to accompany Samuel due to his growing reputation among staff as a therapy dog, padded calmly beside him. When they reached the oak tree, Samuel paused, scanning every branch, root, and crevice. Max suddenly perked up, sniffing the base of the tree intently. Samuel knelt, brushing away some fallen leaves, revealing a small, weathered box buried in the dirt. Hands trembling, Samuel opened the box. Inside, he found a flash drive and another letter from Emily. Samuel, if you're reading this, it means you've started to uncover the truth. This flash drive contains files I copied from the hospital system, records that prove something terrible is happening. Please be careful. Trust no one except Ethan, and take care of Max. He knows. Samuel's heart raced. The mystery was bigger than he thought. Whatever was on this flash drive, someone had wanted to keep hidden badly enough to silence Emily forever. Later, back home, Samuel inserted the flash drive into his laptop. The screen filled with folders, patient records, internal emails, and something labeled Project Nightfall. As he clicked on Project Nightfall, files opened containing experimental drug trials, unauthorized tests, and a list of patients who had mysteriously died or disappeared. Samuel's stomach turned as he read about patients used as test subjects for a secret treatment, one that had gone horribly wrong. Among the files was a name that made Samuel's blood run cold: Ethan Carter. Samuel reread the document in disbelief. Ethan wasn't just Emily's confidant. He had once been a researcher at the hospital and part of the secret program. But according to these files, he had left abruptly, refusing to participate further in the illegal activities. Just then, Max barked sharply, running to the window. Samuel's eyes followed, and he froze. Across the street, a dark car sat idling. Its tinted windows prevented Samuel from seeing inside, but a chill ran down his spine. They were being watched. Quickly, Samuel gathered the flash drive and Emily's journal, placing them into a secure box. He knew now that danger was real and closer than he imagined. The next day, Samuel arranged to meet Ethan again. They chose a quiet park far from the hospital, where few people would overhear them. Ethan arrived, his face grim. "You found it, didn't you?" Samuel nodded, his voice low. "Project Nightfall, you were part of it." Ethan looked away, guilt shadowing his face. "I was, but I tried to stop it once I realized what they were doing. They used patients, Samuel, people who trusted us." Samuel clenched his fists. "Emily knew, and that's why they killed her." Ethan nodded. "Yes, and now they're watching you too." "What do they want?" Samuel asked, his voice shaking with anger. Ethan sighed. "To erase all traces of what happened, and if that means silencing you and Max, they will." Max growled lowly, as if understanding every word. Samuel's mind was spinning. "What can we do?" Ethan looked at him intently. "Find the last clue Emily left. I believe she hid something more. Proof that could bring this to light. She mentioned a place you both loved, a place only you two knew." Samuel thought hard. Then, it clicked. The library's secret reading room, a quiet alcove they had discovered and used for private conversations. With a new sense of urgency, Samuel and Max left for the library, Ethan promising to watch their backs. The library was quiet, filled with the scent of old books and whispers of knowledge. Samuel led Max to the back, where a hidden door behind an old bookshelf led to the alcove. As they entered, Max immediately darted toward a stack of books, pawing at one in particular. Samuel reached down and pulled it out. Inside, tucked between the pages, was an envelope addressed to him. "Samuel, if you found this, then you've come farther than I ever could. Inside are the names of everyone involved, dates and locations of hidden files. Please use them to stop this, and please, be careful. They won't stop until they erase every piece of the truth. Take care of Max. He's braver than anyone I know. With love, Emily." Tears filled Samuel's eyes as he read. He now held in his hands what could finally bring justice for Emily and the patients who had suffered. Suddenly, Max's growl snapped him back to reality. Samuel turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, a man he recognized as one of the hospital administrators, his expression cold and menacing. "I see you've been busy, Dr. Reed," the man sneered. "It's time you handed over what you found." Samuel stood protectively in front of Max, defiance in his eyes. Not a chance. The man pulled something from his coat, a syringe. "Then I'm afraid you leave me no choice." Max barked furiously, positioning himself between Samuel and the threat. But before the man could move, Ethan appeared behind him, tackling him to the ground. The syringe clattered to the floor, its contents spilling harmlessly. Samuel rushed forward, helping Ethan restrain the man. "You're not going to hurt anyone else," Samuel said firmly, calling the police immediately. When authorities arrived, Samuel handed them the files, the journal, and Emily's letter. The man was arrested on the spot, and as the evidence surfaced, a web of corruption unraveled within the hospital, leading to multiple arrests and a full investigation. Weeks later, Samuel stood by the oak tree with Max, holding a framed photograph of Emily. The hospital had been cleared of the dangerous group, and new management promised to protect patients' rights above all else. Samuel looked down at Max, who wagged his tail gently. "We did it, buddy. We kept her promise." Max licked Samuel's hand, his eyes soft but filled with the strength of loyalty that had brought them through the darkest times. As the sun set behind them, Samuel whispered, "Thank you, Emily. We'll never forget." But as they walked away, a letter fell from Samuel's pocket, a letter he hadn't seen before, addressed to him in Emily's handwriting. As the wind picked it up and carried it toward Max, Samuel realized the story wasn't over just yet. As Samuel bent down to retrieve the mysterious letter that had slipped from his pocket, his hands trembled with anticipation. The envelope felt old, yet preserved with care, Emily's unmistakable handwriting on the front. Max stood quietly beside him, as if sensing that this letter might hold the key to yet another secret. Carefully, Samuel opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. "Samuel, if you are reading this, then everything I feared has come to pass. I knew that uncovering the truth might cost me everything, but there are things I never told anyone, things I was too afraid to speak aloud. There's one final piece of this puzzle that even Ethan doesn't know. A person I trusted deeply is part of the conspiracy. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence is undeniable. You must be careful. Look for the name hidden within. The book we always read together, the one with the blue cover. Inside, you'll find a clue to who betrayed us. Please, Samuel, protect Max and protect yourself. The truth is bigger than both of us. I only hope you find this in time. Forever. Yours, Emily." Samuel's heart thudded in his chest. Someone close to Emily, perhaps even close to him, had been part of the dark plot. His mind raced back to their shared moments in the hospital library. The blue-covered book. How could he have forgotten? With new urgency, Samuel and Max made their way back to the library. The sky was growing darker, and the once comforting silence of the library now felt heavy with anticipation. Samuel scanned the shelves until his eyes fell on the blue horizon, Emily's favorite book. He pulled it down, fingers running over the worn cover. As he flipped through the pages, a folded note fell out. Opening it, Samuel read, "The one you trust the most hides the deepest secrets. Look beneath the painting in my apartment. E." Samuel's mind whirled. He had been to Emily's apartment before, but he had never thought to look beyond what was visible. Without wasting time, he rushed out with Max at his heels, determination burning in his eyes. Upon arriving at Emily's apartment, the familiar scent of her lavender candles still lingered. Samuel approached the painting above her writing desk, a serene depiction of a sunset over water. Gently, he lifted it from the wall and gasped. Behind it was a safe, cleverly hidden. Max sat attentively, watching Samuel's every move. After several failed attempts, Samuel tried a combination he had seen Emily use once for her locker, her mother's birthday. The safe clicked open, revealing a stack of documents, a small notebook, and a flash drive labeled "Final Truth." Samuel quickly scanned the documents. His heart sank as he read name after name, people involved in Project Nightfall. But what shocked him most was seeing Dr. Thomas Walker's name among them, the very doctor who had mentored him, who had comforted Emily during her final days. Max let out a low growl, as if recognizing the danger in that name. The notebook contained Emily's final observations, detailed accounts of conversations, transactions, and her growing suspicion of Dr. Walker's involvement. There was even a mention of Walker threatening her when she got too close to the truth. Samuel sat down heavily, overwhelmed by betrayal. Walker, all this time, you were part of it, he whispered to himself. The flash drive was the final piece. Samuel plugged it into his laptop and watched as videos played. Secret recordings of meetings where patients were discussed as subjects. Walker's voice clearly heard among them, orchestrating the entire operation. Samuel knew what he had to do. This evidence had to go public. But as he gathered everything, a sharp knock sounded at the door. Max growled again, standing between Samuel and the entrance. Samuel's phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Be careful. I think they know you have the files." Samuel quickly packed the documents and flash drive into a bag. He opened a back window, signaling to Max, who leapt out first. Just as Samuel climbed out, the door burst open and 2 men stormed in, clearly sent to retrieve the evidence by any means necessary. Breathing heavily, Samuel and Max escaped down the fire escape into the night. They couldn't go back home. Not yet. But Samuel knew who he had to contact, a trusted journalist known for exposing corruption. It was time for the world to know what had been happening behind the hospital's closed doors. As Samuel and Max disappeared into the shadows, the weight of what lay ahead settled on Samuel's shoulders. He looked down at Max, who walked confidently beside him, tail high as if saying, "We'll get through this." Samuel whispered, "For Emily, we'll finish what you started." But unknown to Samuel, a figure watched from across the street, speaking quietly into a phone. "He has the files. Proceed as planned." The storm was far from over, and the greatest danger was yet to come. Nightfall had blanketed the city, and Samuel found himself moving swiftly through empty streets, Max keeping pace beside him. His heart pounded with every step as he clutched the bag holding Emily's final proof. They had nowhere safe to go, and the shadows seemed to whisper threats all around them. Suddenly, Samuel's phone rang. He hesitated before answering, fearing it could be another attempt to track him. But when he saw Ethan's name, he quickly picked up. "Samuel, are you okay?" Ethan's voice was tense. "I have the files, but they found me. I had to run." "Listen," Ethan said, lowering his voice. "You need to meet me at the old train yard, East Side. It's abandoned. No one will expect us there. I'll bring someone I trust. We'll figure this out." Samuel agreed and hung up. With Max's leash tight in his hand, he made his way to the train yard, the cold night air biting at his face. Every few minutes, Max would glance up at him, as though silently reassuring Samuel that they would make it through. Finally, they arrived at the yard. Rusted trains sat quietly on dead tracks, and an eerie silence filled the place. Samuel spotted Ethan standing under a flickering lamp, talking to a woman, a journalist perhaps. As Samuel approached, Ethan waved him over. "This is Laura Mendez. She's one of the best investigative journalists. If anyone can bring this to light, it's her." Laura, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, extended her hand. "Ethan told me everything. You've done something incredible, Samuel. We'll expose them. But we need to act fast. They'll be coming for you." Samuel nodded, handing over the bag. "Everything's in here. Files, videos, Emily's notes. It's enough to take them down." Laura opened the bag slightly, glancing at the contents. "This is explosive. I'll need to verify everything and get it to my editor. But once this breaks, they'll know who leaked it." "I don't care," Samuel said firmly. "They have to pay for what they did to Emily, to all those patients." Just then, Max growled, his ears flat against his head. Samuel turned, and his heart dropped. From the shadows, 2 men emerged, faces hidden but their intentions clear. "Run!" Ethan shouted. But before anyone could move, one of the men raised a gun. A shot rang out, echoing through the train yard. Max barked ferociously, leaping. between Samuel and danger. The bullet grazed Max's side, and he let out a sharp yelp but stayed on his feet, guarding Samuel fiercely. Samuel's rage exploded. "Max!" he cried out, stepping protectively in front of his injured companion. Laura quickly pulled Samuel behind a nearby train car. "We need to get out of here now!" Ethan tackled one of the men, managing to disarm him briefly, but the other raised his weapon again. Just as he fired, Max lunged at him, knocking his aim off. The bullet missed Samuel by inches. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Laura must have called for backup. The attackers realized they were out of time and fled into the darkness, leaving Ethan breathless but alive and Max bleeding but still standing tall. "We have to get Max to a vet," Samuel said urgently, his eyes filled with tears. "I know a place," Ethan said, helping him up. "Come on." Hours later, Max lay on a table in a small vet clinic, bandaged but stable. The vet reassured Samuel. "He's strong. He'll pull through." Samuel sat beside Max, holding his paw gently. "You saved my life, buddy. I won't forget that." Meanwhile, Laura was already working fast. She had taken copies of the files and driven straight to her editor, preparing for a public exposé. Within hours, national news outlets had picked up the story. Corruption, illegal experiments, the death of innocent patients. And Emily's name was at the center, a hero who gave her life for the truth. As dawn broke, Samuel sat in the vet clinic watching news anchors report the breaking story. Across every channel, photos of the hospital, of Emily, and of Dr. Walker flashed on screen. Protests began forming outside the hospital, demanding justice. Yet Samuel knew it wasn't over. He still had to confront Walker. He had to hear from the man himself why he had betrayed everyone. Later that day, Samuel made his way to the hospital, where police were already present, searching for remaining evidence. He was escorted inside by officers who had been briefed on his role as a whistleblower. In Walker's office, Samuel found the doctor calmly sitting at his desk, as though nothing had happened. "You're brave to come here, Samuel," Walker said with a smirk. "But bravery won't save you." Samuel glared at him. "It's over. The world knows. You can't hurt anyone else." Walker's smirk faded. "You think this ends with me? There are others. People you don't even know. You've started a war, Samuel, and you'll never see the end of it." Samuel took a step forward, his voice steady. "Maybe. But at least now people know. Emily didn't die for nothing." Walker was arrested moments later, escorted out in handcuffs as reporters swarmed the hospital grounds. Outside, Samuel found Ethan waiting, a smile of relief on his face. "You did it." Samuel looked down at Max, now sitting by his side, tail gently wagging. "No, we did it." As the sun rose higher, Samuel realized the battle was won. But the fight for justice, for all the forgotten victims, had only just begun. Max pressed close to him, and Samuel whispered, "We'll keep going, Max. For Emily, for everyone." But, unknown to them, in a high-rise office far from the hospital, another figure watched the news reports with narrowed eyes. A phone pressed to his ear. He spoke coldly. "Plan B begins now." The following days were a whirlwind of media coverage, police, investigations, and public outrage. The files Samuel had uncovered with Max's help led to the arrest of several high-profile figures in the hospital administration. Emily's story was finally being heard, and her name was now synonymous with bravery and sacrifice. Yet, despite the victories, Samuel couldn't shake off a gnawing feeling. Something wasn't right. He kept remembering Walker's final words. "You've started a war, Samuel, and you'll never see the end of it." What did he mean? Were there others involved, even beyond what they'd exposed? Max, now recovering well, sat by Samuel's side as he went over the files again, looking for anything he might have missed. Late at night, as the city outside lay in silence, Samuel stumbled across an encrypted folder deep within the flash drive. A file named The Foundation caught his eye. It took him hours to bypass the encryption, but when the file finally opened, Samuel's heart sank. Inside were detailed communications and plans, not only about Project Nightfall, but about a broader network of secret experiments, funded and protected by a clandestine organization known as the Foundation. Their influence extended beyond the hospital into other institutions, research centers, pharmaceutical companies, even government agencies. "Oh my God," Samuel whispered as he scrolled through the files. "This is bigger than I thought." Max let out a low growl, as if sensing the danger within those words. Samuel knew he couldn't face this alone. He quickly called Ethan and Laura, arranging an urgent meeting at Laura's apartment. When they gathered, Samuel laid out the new discovery. Laura's eyes widened as she read through the files. "This changes everything. This isn't just about the hospital. This is a global operation." Ethan leaned forward, rubbing his face with both hands. No wonder Walker seemed so calm. Even if he goes down, there are others who will keep this alive. "We need to expose the Foundation," Samuel said firmly. "But we have to be careful. If they realize we have this, they'll come after us harder than before." Laura nodded. "We need allies. Whistleblower networks, maybe law enforcement outside of the local police. Someone we can trust." As they strategized, Max stayed close, watching them all with sharp eyes. It was as if he knew that danger was still lurking. The next morning, as Samuel and Max walked to a nearby cafe to grab breakfast, Samuel's phone buzzed with an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A calm but firm voice spoke. "Dr. Reed, we know what you found. You are playing a dangerous game. Walk away while you still can." Before Samuel could respond, the call ended. Max barked sharply, glancing around as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows. Samuel knelt beside Max, stroking his fur. "We're not backing down, Max. No matter what." Later that day, Laura contacted a trusted international journalist, Sofia Alvarez, known for exposing government conspiracies. Samuel, Ethan, and Laura met her secretly, sharing everything they had discovered about the Foundation. Sofia, a sharp-minded woman with a calm demeanor, listened intently. "If what you're saying is true, this could shake the world. But exposing something like this won't be easy. They'll try to silence us." Samuel nodded. "They already have. They killed Emily. They tried to kill me. Max almost died protecting me." Sofia looked at Max, who wagged his tail gently but kept a watchful eye on the door. "Then we'll need to move carefully. I'll start gathering independent verification. You'll need to stay hidden." As days passed, Samuel noticed strangers watching him from across the street. Once he even found his apartment door slightly ajar when he was sure he had locked it. The threat was real and getting closer. Max never left Samuel's side, always alert, always guarding. One evening, as Samuel sat reading through more files, there was a knock at the door. Max tensed instantly, standing in front of Samuel. When Samuel cautiously approached and peered through the peephole, he saw an envelope taped to the outside. Opening the door carefully, Samuel took the envelope and quickly shut the door again. Inside was a note. "We see you. Stop now, or Max is next." Samuel's blood ran cold. He gripped Max tightly. "I won't let them hurt you. I promise." He called Ethan and Laura immediately. "They're threatening Max. We need to move. Now." Within hours, they relocated to a safe house Sofia arranged. There, surrounded by reinforced security, Samuel, Max, Ethan, Laura, and Sofia continued to work, gathering more evidence and preparing to reveal everything to the world. Finally, after weeks of preparation, Sofia's investigation aired on global news networks. The exposé was explosive, revealing the Foundation's secret network, their illegal experiments, and the deaths of countless innocent people. Emily's story was at the center, a courageous doctor who paid the ultimate price for truth. Public outrage erupted worldwide. Investigations were launched in multiple countries. Arrests began to happen as more insiders came forward, emboldened by the revelations. In the aftermath, as life began to calm, Samuel stood in a park with Max, watching children play and families laugh, scenes that felt distant during their ordeal. Ethan joined him, smiling. "You did it, Samuel. You honored Emily." Samuel looked down at Max, who sat proudly at his side. We did it. All of us. Max barked happily, and Samuel ruffled his ears. You're more than just a dog, Max. You're family. As the sun set, Samuel felt a sense of peace. But deep down, he knew the fight for justice was never truly over. And as long as there were people like the Foundation out there, he and Max would be ready. Together. The city woke to a new dawn, but for Samuel, Ethan, and Max, it was merely the calm before another storm. Though Dr. Walker had been arrested, Samuel knew that the mastermind, the person Walker had alluded to, was still out there, lurking, plotting. And now, with the files exposed and Emily's name cleared, the stakes had risen higher than ever. Samuel sat in Ethan's apartment, watching Max resting on a blanket. The pup's wound was healing well, but Samuel still couldn't shake the guilt of nearly losing him. Ethan placed 2 cups of coffee on the table and sat down opposite Samuel. We should celebrate, Ethan said quietly. You took them down. The world knows. Samuel shook his head. It's not over, Ethan. Walker said there are others. What if they're already planning something worse? Before Ethan could answer, Samuel's phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number, and the message sent a chill down his spine. You think you've won, but the game has just begun. Samuel read the message aloud, and Ethan's face turned serious. Who the hell is D? He asked. I don't know, Samuel replied, but they know us. Meanwhile, in a luxurious office overlooking the city skyline, a man known only as Dorian D leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. His sharp eyes watched as news outlets continued to broadcast the hospital scandal. A woman entered the room, carrying a tablet. Sir, we have a situation. The files leaked by the journalist. They're causing a massive stir. Our overseas partners are demanding explanations. Dorian smiled coldly. Of course they are, but let them panic. We've already set Plan B in motion. Soon, no one will remember Samuel or that little nurse. Back at Ethan's apartment, Samuel was restless. We need to find out who this Dorian is, and fast. Ethan nodded. Laura might help. She has sources we don't. Samuel agreed. They called Laura and set up a secret meeting in a nearby park, choosing a location far from prying eyes and ears. As they arrived, Laura was already waiting, looking over her shoulder every few seconds. You weren't followed? She asked immediately. No, Ethan said. But someone named D sent Samuel a message. They're still out there. Laura's face darkened. I've heard whispers about a Dorian. He's the one funding many of these illegal operations, hospitals, experiments, cover-ups. But he's powerful. Samuel, we're talking billions, political connections, the kind of person who erases anyone that gets too close. Samuel clenched his fists. We need proof. Laura hesitated. If we go after him, we're going to need allies. More than just us. Ethan put a hand on Samuel's shoulder. Then let's find them. Over the next few days, Samuel, Ethan, and Laura began to reach out to trusted individuals, other journalists, honest law enforcement officers, and even former employees of the hospital who might have known more than they dared to say. Among them was a woman named Dr. Grace Holloway, a brilliant but quiet scientist who had left the hospital 2 years earlier under mysterious circumstances. When they approached her, she was hesitant, but agreed to meet. At a secluded cafe, Grace finally opened up. I left because I couldn't be part of it anymore. The experiments, they weren't just unethical, they were dangerous. They were trying to create something they called Project Rebirth. Project Rebirth? Samuel echoed, confused. Grace nodded. They wanted to create a serum that could regenerate cells, heal any injury, cure any disease. But it had side effects, terrible side effects. And when the test subjects, humans, started dying, they covered it up. Emily knew. She tried to stop them. Samuel's heart sank. That's why they killed her. Yes, Grace said. And if Dorian is still out there, he's likely continuing the experiments, maybe even refining them. Ethan looked at Samuel. We need to expose this. Project Rebirth. Grace hesitated. "If you do this, they'll come for you, all of you." Samuel looked down at Max, who watched him loyally, then back at Grace. "Then let them come. We're not backing down." The next morning, Samuel, Ethan, and Laura gathered at Laura's office to plan their next move. They pored over every document Grace had provided: hidden files, confidential reports, and horrifying images of failed test subjects. Among the files was a list of locations where Project Rebirth was being continued. One of them was an off-the-grid medical facility located in the forest outside town, a place no one knew existed. "We need to get in there," Samuel said, determination hardening his voice. "See what they're doing," Ethan agreed. "We'll need a plan." Max barked softly, as if in support. Meanwhile, at the forest facility, Dorian walked through sterile white halls, observing scientists working around the clock. In a glass chamber, a patient lay unconscious, hooked up to strange machines pumping glowing blue liquid into their veins. One of the doctors approached Dorian. "Sir, the serum is unstable. The last subject—" "I know," Dorian interrupted coldly, "but we are close. We'll perfect it, no matter the cost." Back in town, Samuel stared at the map, then looked to Ethan and Laura. "Tonight we go in." As the sun set, they prepared for the mission, gathering cameras, flash drives, and what little protective gear they could muster. Max sat by Samuel's side, ready as ever. Samuel knelt and scratched behind Max's ears. "You ready for this, buddy?" Max let out a low bark, tail wagging. Laura took a deep breath. "Let's bring them down." "For Emily." Ethan nodded. "For everyone." As darkness fell, they set out, unaware that Dorian was already watching and waiting. The night was darker than ever as Samuel, Ethan, Laura, and Max made their way toward the hidden medical facility in the forest. Trees loomed around them like silent watchers, their branches creaking in the cold wind. Max walked closely to Samuel, his eyes sharp and alert. "We're almost there," Laura whispered, checking her phone's GPS. "The facility should be just beyond that ridge." They carefully climbed the hill, ducking low to avoid detection. As they reached the top, Samuel saw it, a sprawling high-tech building surrounded by fences and armed guards. Floodlights illuminated the area, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Ethan peered through binoculars. "Looks like they've upped security. Getting in won't be easy." Samuel nodded, determination set in his face. "But we have to. We need to know what they're doing in there." Laura pulled out a tablet, displaying a floor plan Grace had provided. "There's a service entrance on the east side. If we can distract the guards, we might be able to slip in." Max let out a low growl, as if understanding the danger ahead. Ethan looked at Samuel. "We'll need to split up. You and Max go for the entrance. Laura and I will create a diversion." Samuel agreed, gripping Max's leash. "Be careful." As Laura and Ethan moved to create a distraction, Samuel and Max circled around to the east. They stayed in the shadows, avoiding the floodlights. Max's ears twitched, catching every sound. Then, a loud bang echoed. Ethan and Laura's diversion. Guards rushed toward the noise, leaving the east side vulnerable. Samuel seized the opportunity, guiding Max through a gap in the fence. They slipped inside the facility. Inside, the hallways were sterile and cold, lined with glass observation rooms. Samuel felt his stomach turn as he peeked inside one. Patients hooked to strange machines, glowing blue fluid pumping through their veins just as Grace had described. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the hallway. "You shouldn't be here." Samuel spun around, facing a woman in a lab coat, Dr. Helena Cross. She looked tired, her eyes filled with guilt. "Please, you have to stop this," Samuel pleaded. "People are dying." Helena shook her head. "You don't understand. If we succeed, we'll cure everything. Cancer, injuries, aging. But the cost is high." "Too high," Samuel said firmly. "Emily died trying to stop this." Helena's eyes softened at Emily's name. "She was brave, braver than me," Max growled. As footsteps approached, guards. Helena's eyes darted to the door. "Follow me, quick!" She led them through a side corridor to a secure lab. "Here," she said, handing Samuel a flash drive. Everything's on here. The real data, the failures, the deaths. You can expose them, but you have to go now. Samuel took the drive, gratitude and urgency burning in his chest. Come with us. Helena shook her head. I'll only slow you down. Just go. Reluctantly, Samuel nodded and slipped back into the hall with Max. They made their way toward the exit, but as they turned a corner, they ran straight into Dorian. Going somewhere? Dorian smirked, flanked by armed guards. You've been a thorn in my side, Samuel. It's time to end this. Samuel stood tall, clutching the drive. It's over, Dorian. The world will know. Dorian's eyes darkened. You won't leave here alive. But before he could give the order, Max lunged, teeth bared, attacking one of the guards and causing chaos. Samuel used the distraction to duck and run, dragging Max with him as bullets ricocheted off walls. Just as they neared the exit, Ethan and Laura appeared, having fought their way back inside. Come on, Ethan yelled. Together, they burst through the doors and fled into the woods, gunfire trailing behind them. They didn't stop until they were deep in the forest, hidden from sight. Breathing heavily, Samuel clutched the flash drive. We got it, Laura smiled. It's enough to take them down. Ethan looked back toward the facility, now swarming with activity. But they'll come after us harder than ever. Samuel nodded. Let them. We'll fight. For Emily. For everyone they hurt. Max sat beside him, tail thumping softly, a symbol of unwavering loyalty and strength. As they made their way back to the city, the dawn light broke through the trees, a sign of hope in the darkness. But they knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a much bigger battle, and they were ready. The sun rose over the city as Samuel, Ethan, Laura, and Max returned to their hideout. The flash drive they had secured was now their most precious possession. It contained the truth, evidence of Project Rebirth, the failed experiments, and the lives lost. But more than that, it was their weapon against Dorian. Laura plugged the drive into her laptop, and files began to pour onto the screen. Documents, videos, test results. It's all here, she whispered. This is enough to blow everything wide open. Samuel looked at her, then at Ethan. We need to get this out there, fast, before Dorian can silence us. Ethan nodded. I know a few people who can help. Trusted journalists, whistleblower platforms. Max sat by Samuel's side, resting but alert. Samuel ran a hand over the dog's head. You saved us again, buddy. As they worked, a sudden knock echoed through the apartment, freezing everyone in place. Ethan cautiously approached the door, gun in hand. He peered through the peephole and sighed in relief. It's Grace. He let her in quickly, and Grace entered, looking over her shoulder nervously. You need to leave. Now. Dorian's men are already searching for you. Samuel stood. We're not running. Not until we expose him. Grace looked desperate. If you stay, you won't live to do it. Laura glanced at Samuel. Maybe we can move to a safer location while we work. I know a place. Samuel hesitated, then nodded. All right, let's go. Within the hour, they were on the move. Laura led them to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, a place she had used before to hide sensitive sources. It was cold and dusty, but it would do. As night fell, they set up makeshift beds and kept working. The files were damning, proof of human testing, fatal side effects, and Emily's attempts to blow the whistle before her death. Laura paused on a video file labeled, Confession, Dr. Emily Carter. With a trembling hand, she played it. Emily's face appeared on the screen, tired but determined. If you're seeing this, it means they've silenced me, but you have to know the truth. They're using people, innocent people, for experiments. They lied to me, and when I tried to stop them, they came after me. Please stop them. Save the others. Tears welled in Samuel's eyes. Max whined softly, as if he understood the weight of the moment. We'll finish what you started, Emily, Samuel whispered. Meanwhile, in his tower office, Dorian watched a monitor as his men searched the city. His jaw tightened when they reported failure. "Find them," he growled. "Or don't bother coming back." He turned to Helena, who had been forced to return after Samuel's escape. "You gave them the data, didn't you?" Helena met his gaze, unflinching. "They deserve to know the truth." Dorian's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret that." Back at the warehouse, Samuel and the others began contacting journalists, sending encrypted files to multiple outlets. They knew time was against them. Suddenly, Max's ears perked up. He let out a low growl, moving toward the door. Samuel stood, tensing. "What is it, boy?" Seconds later, headlights swept across the warehouse walls. Vehicles pulled up outside, black SUVs. Dorian's men had found them. Ethan grabbed his weapon. "They're here." Laura gathered the remaining files and her laptop. "We have to move!" Samuel looked around, searching for an escape. Max barked sharply, running toward a back door. "This way!" Samuel shouted. They burst through the door into the alley as armed men surrounded the front entrance. Bullets rang out. As they ran, ducking behind crates and fences, Max stayed close to Samuel, growling and barking at their pursuers. Ethan fired back, covering their retreat. "Keep moving." They managed to reach a nearby parking lot, where an old van was waiting. One of Laura's backup plans. They piled in, Max jumping in last, and sped off into the night. Samuel looked back at the fading warehouse, heart pounding. "They know we have the files. They'll never stop now." Laura, driving fast, said firmly, "Then we won't either. We're taking this fight public." Max rested his head on Samuel's lap, eyes still alert. Samuel stroked his fur. "We're in this together, buddy." As the van disappeared into the darkness, a new resolve filled the group. They would not rest until Dorian and his empire were brought down, until Emily's voice was heard by the world, and Max, the loyal little puppy who had waited so long, was now part of a fight far bigger than anyone could have imagined. The night air was tense as Laura drove the van through back alleys and quiet streets, trying to stay off the radar. Max lay at Samuel's feet, panting, but still alert to every sound outside. In the back, Ethan worked quickly to encrypt and upload more files to secure locations. "We can't keep running forever," Ethan muttered. "They'll find us again." Laura gripped the steering wheel. "Then we have to strike first. Get this story out before Dorian can bury it." Samuel looked out the window, deep in thought. What if we hit him where it hurts? His investors, his public image. If they see what he's done, they'll abandon him. Grace, sitting in the passenger seat, nodded. "I know a reporter who's been trying to take down corrupt corporations for years. If we can get to her, she can broadcast this to the world." Laura changed course, heading toward the outskirts of town. "Then that's where we'll go." Meanwhile, in Dorian's high-rise, chaos reigned. His men reported the warehouse empty, the files gone, and Samuel's team missing. Dorian slammed his fist onto his desk, sending papers flying. "Find them," he roared. "I want every exit covered, every ally of theirs watched, and if you catch them, eliminate them." Helena stood quietly, nearby, watching his rage. She had made her choice and knew there was no turning back. Dorian glared at her. "You think you've won? You think they can stop me?" Helena met his eyes. "If anyone can, they will." Dorian's lips curled into a snarl. "We'll see about that." By dawn, Laura pulled the van into an underground parking lot. Above them was a nondescript apartment complex, home to Nadia Reyes, a journalist known for exposing the darkest corners of the corporate world. Samuel, Ethan, and Grace stepped out, with Max leading the way. They made their way to the 5th floor, knocking quietly on Nadia's door. It opened a crack and sharp brown eyes peeked out. "Who are you?" she asked cautiously. Grace stepped forward. "You don't know me, but I know you want the truth. And we have it." Nadia's eyes narrowed. "Come in." Inside, they quickly explained everything, showing her the files, Emily's video, and the evidence of the human trials. Nadia's face grew pale as she scrolled through the information. This is massive," she whispered. "If I publish this, Dorian's entire operation will fall. But he'll come for me too. Samuel nodded. We know, but we can't let him keep hurting people. Nadia took a deep breath. All right, I'll do it. But we need a way to get this out securely, without giving him a chance to stop it. Ethan smiled. I have an idea. Over the next hours, the group worked tirelessly. Ethan set up a network of mirror sites, so if one went down, another would go up. Nadia drafted her article, carefully laying out every piece of evidence. Grace compiled a list of victims and witnesses to speak out. Max never left Samuel's side, his presence a reminder of what they were fighting for. As night fell again, Nadia finished the last line of her article. Ready? She asked, her finger hovering over the upload button. Samuel looked at the others. They all nodded. Do it, he said. With a click, the files and story went live. Within minutes, social media exploded. News outlets picked it up. Headlines screamed about the illegal human experiments and the lives lost to Dorian's ambition. Emily's video was shared around the world, her voice finally heard. In his office, Dorian stared at the news on his screen, his face pale. Investors were pulling out. Lawsuits were being announced. Protesters gathered outside his headquarters. No, no, he shouted, throwing his glass against the wall. Helena watched silently. It's over, Dorian. But Dorian's eyes darkened. Not yet. Back in Nadia's apartment, cheers broke out as they watched the news. Samuel hugged Grace and Laura, while Ethan laughed in relief. Max barked joyfully, wagging his tail, but amid the celebration, Samuel's phone buzzed. He picked it up, his face falling as he listened. When he hung up, the room grew quiet. What is it? Laura asked. Samuel looked at them grimly. Dorian's desperate. He's planning something big, a final move to silence everyone. What kind of move? Ethan asked, standing up. Samuel hesitated. I'm not sure, but if we don't stop him, more people will die. Max growled low, sensing the tension. Samuel knelt down, rubbing Max's head. Looks like we're not done yet, buddy. Laura stood beside Samuel. Then let's finish this. Outside, as dawn began to rise, the city was waking up to the truth. But in the shadows, danger still lurked. Samuel and his team knew that the final battle was coming, and they would be ready. Max, the little puppy who had waited so loyally, was now a hero in his own right. And as they prepared for what lay ahead, his eyes gleamed with courage. The fight was far from over. The morning light barely filtered through the curtains of Nadia's apartment as the team gathered again, preparing for the next phase. The night's victory had been huge, but Samuel knew Dorian was not a man to give up easily. Nadia, already on her laptop, scanned through the flood of emails and calls she had received after the expose. People are coming forward, Samuel. Scientists, patients' families, even former employees. But they're scared. Dorian's reach is deep. Grace paced the room. If Dorian's planning something, we need to find out what, and fast. Max, sensing the tension, sat near the window, watching the street below as if expecting danger at any moment. Suddenly, Ethan's phone buzzed with a secure message. His face hardened as he read. It's worse than we thought. Dorian's mobilizing a private security force. He's planning to destroy all remaining evidence, including those facilities, and anyone left inside. Laura looked horrified. We have to stop him. There are people in there, innocent people. Samuel's jaw tightened. Then we go back in, one last time. Meanwhile, inside his towering headquarters, Dorian was orchestrating his final play. He sat at a vast desk surrounded by screens displaying chaos, protests, breaking news, and stock crashes. Send the teams to the secondary lab and the mountain facility, he ordered, his voice cold. No loose ends. An assistant hesitated. Sir, some of the subjects, they won't survive being moved in this condition. Dorian's eyes burned. Do it. Helena, standing nearby, clenched her fists. Her eyes met Dorian's, filled with silent rage. She knew what she had to do. As Samuel's team finalized their plan, a sudden knock at Nadia's door startled them. Max stood up instantly, growling low. Laura carefully peered through the peephole, and her eyes widened. It's Helena, alone. Samuel opened the door cautiously. Helena stepped in, her face pale but determined. "You were right. He's planning to wipe out everyone left in the labs. We don't have much time." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Why should we trust you?" Helena looked straight at Samuel. "Because I was part of it, and I need to make it right." Grace nodded, stepping forward. "Then help us stop him." Helena pulled out a flash drive. "Here, security codes, floor plans, and a list of the people still trapped in the labs. Some of them were forced into those experiments. We have to get them out." Laura's voice was firm. "Then let's move." Night fell as they reached the mountain facility. Perched on a cliffside, it looked like an impenetrable fortress, but now they had the advantage: Helena's inside knowledge. Hidden in the woods, Samuel surveyed the perimeter with binoculars. Guards patrolled heavily, but there were blind spots Helena pointed out. Max crouched beside him, ready to follow. At a word, Ethan prepped their gear. "We'll split up. Grace and I will handle the security room, loop the cameras and open the cells. You and Max find the prisoners. Laura and Helena, backup and extraction." Samuel nodded. "Let's go." Inside the facility, darkness and cold steel greeted them. The air was thick with fear as Samuel and Max crept down narrow halls, avoiding guards. Through a window, they saw them. The prisoners, men, women, even children, pale and weak, many, connected to machines pumping glowing fluid. Max whimpered softly, pressing against Samuel as if sensing their pain. In the security room, Ethan worked fast, hacking into the system as Grace kept watch. Come on, Ethan muttered, fingers flying across the keyboard. Got it. Doors unlocked, cameras looping. Back in the cells, locks clicked open. Samuel entered, calling softly, "We're here to help. Can you walk?" Some stood shakily. Others needed help. Max gently nudged a child forward, guiding them out. Suddenly, alarms blared. Ethan's voice crackled through the earpiece. "They're on to us. You need to move now." Samuel herded the prisoners toward the exit, but Dorian's guards blocked the way. Just when it seemed hopeless, Laura and Helena appeared, launching smoke grenades and taking out guards with precise shots. "This way!" Laura yelled. The group moved fast, but as they neared the exit, Dorian himself stood waiting, flanked by armed men. "Going somewhere?" he sneered. Samuel stepped forward. "It's over, Dorian. The world knows." Dorian's smirk twisted. "Maybe, but you won't live to see it." Before he could give the order to fire, Max leapt forward, knocking a guard to the ground. Chaos erupted, gunfire, smoke, shouting. Samuel fought fiercely, protecting the weak behind him. Helena faced Dorian, her voice steady. "You destroyed lives, including mine." Dorian laughed bitterly. "You were part of it." "Not anymore." With that, Helena pressed a button on her device, triggering an explosion in the lab's lower level, destroying Dorian's remaining research. In the smoke and confusion, Samuel led the prisoners to a waiting vehicle, Laura and Ethan covering them. Max stayed close, ensuring no one was left behind. Helena stood facing Dorian, who now realized his empire was crumbling. "Goodbye, Dorian." She turned and walked away, as the sirens of approaching law enforcement echoed in the distance. As dawn broke over the mountains, Samuel and his team, along with the rescued survivors, watched as the facility burned in the distance. "It's over," Grace whispered, tears in her eyes. Samuel nodded, though his heart was heavy with the weight of all they had endured. Max sat proudly by his side, watching the sunrise, a symbol of unwavering loyalty and courage. Laura looked at Samuel. "What now?" He took a deep breath. "We help these people rebuild and make sure nothing like this happens again." Nadia's report had gone viral worldwide. Public outrage had forced authorities to act. Arrest warrants were issued for Dorian and his remaining collaborators. The truth had finally come to light. As they headed back to the city, Max rested his head on Samuel's lap, finally able to relax, knowing his loyalty had helped save lives. But as Samuel looked out the window, he knew their fight for justice was never truly over. Still, for now, they had won. And that was enough. Months had passed since the burning of Dorian's facility. The world had changed. The news of the horrifying experiments had sparked a worldwide movement to protect the vulnerable and regulate scientific research. Yet, for Samuel, Ethan, Laura, Grace, and Max, life was only beginning to find its new normal. The sun rose gently over the city, casting golden hues on the hospital where it all started. Samuel stood near the entrance, looking at the spot where Max had once waited night after night. Today, it was a symbol of hope, not sorrow. Nadia's documentary had been released globally, winning awards and, more importantly, igniting hearts. Survivors from the experiments were receiving medical care and therapy. Many had begun rebuilding their lives. Samuel, now working as a patient advocate, guided former victims through their healing journeys. Max was always at his side, a comforting presence not just for Samuel but for everyone they helped. One afternoon, as Samuel sat in the hospital garden, Max resting at his feet, a young girl approached, holding her mother's hand. It was Lily, one of the children they had rescued from the facility. Her hair had grown back and her eyes now sparkled with life. "Mr. Samuel, can I pet Max?" she asked shyly. Samuel smiled warmly. "Of course. He loves making new friends." As Max gently nuzzled Lily, her mother whispered to Samuel, tears in her eyes, "Thank you. You gave me my daughter back." Samuel felt a lump in his throat. It was Max, really. He showed us the way. Meanwhile, Dorian's arrest had made headlines worldwide. His trial had been swift. Evidence gathered by Samuel's team and Helena had been irrefutable. Facing life sentences, Dorian and his collaborators would never hurt anyone again. Helena, though carrying the weight of her past, had found a new purpose. She worked tirelessly with Grace to establish a foundation to support victims of unethical medical trials. Their mission was to ensure no one would ever suffer what those people had endured. One evening, as the team gathered for dinner, Samuel, Laura, Ethan, Grace, and Helena, there was a sense of peace among them that had been missing for so long. Ethan raised his glass. "To Emily." They all joined in, tears and smiles mixed. "To Emily." Samuel glanced at Max, who sat proudly, tail wagging. He reached down, scratching behind Max's ears. "And to the bravest dog I know." As laughter filled the room, the camera of Nadia's next documentary caught the moment. It was a story not of tragedy, but of resilience, hope, and an unbreakable bond between a man and a dog. In the days that followed, Samuel and Max would walk the streets of the town, often stopping to visit the hospital. People would smile and wave, children would run to pet Max, and Samuel would share their story, reminding everyone that even in the darkest moments, loyalty, love, and courage could light the way. As the sun set behind the hills, casting a warm glow over the city, Samuel stood with Max watching the horizon. "We did it, buddy. We really did it." Max let out a soft bark, as if agreeing, and with that, they turned toward home, ready to face whatever came next, together.